Yeah.
In this video, we're going to cover a basic overview of the interface inside of After Effects. Now, since this is a general overview, I'm not going to jump into the details about every single aspect. This is designed to be a basic workflow overview so you can have a general idea as to how to move around in After Effects composition. So let's go ahead and get started by looking at our After Effects project that we currently have open. Whenever you're working in After Effects, you should always look in the upper right corner at the workspace. Notice there's a pull down, and I'm going to click on the pull down that says Standard. The workspaces are designed around individual job tasks, so whether you're using After Effects for visual effects work or whether you're using it for design work, you'll have a slightly different interface, and you can easily switch back and forth between multiple interfaces. So for example, if I were trying to add some type into this scene, I would go ahead and change to the text workspace. Notice now on the right-hand side, I have a character panel, and this panel gives me the ability to choose a typeface as well as the size of the type and all the other typical adjustments you would expect with a type tool. Now that we're in this text workspace, I could add text by grabbing the tool. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner of the After Effects interface, we have a toolbar. Now, it's divided up into individual sections, and text is in the Create Tools section. So here I could create different shapes, or I could create text. Now let's add some text so we can see how the rest of the interface works together. I'm going to grab the text tool just by clicking on it. You could press Command-T. Now in the composition panel here, this gives me a visual reference for the composition that we're working on. I'm going to go ahead and just click anywhere where I'd like to insert my text. So I'll click in the clouds, and I'll type the word snowboard. Now when I'm finished typing, I'll go back to my toolbar and grab my selection tool. Notice when I added that word, now a new layer appeared in the timeline down here. Now most of the time when I'm working in After Effects, I'm working in the standard workspace. So now that we've added some text, let's go back up to the workspace and change that back to standard. Now in a standard workflow, or in any workflow in After Effects, we have the project panel. The project panel is the overall container that contains any elements that you might be working with within any of your projects. So the project we've been working on right now is our snowboarding composition. So just like Premiere Pro can have multiple sequences, After Effects can have multiple compositions. If we double click on a composition, it loads that composition into my composition viewer here and into the timeline. Now the relationship between these two is very much like Photoshop. In Photoshop, you have your canvas where you can view the results of any of your layers that you've organized in your projects. Well, in After Effects, we have our layers in our timeline panel, and then our viewer is the composition window. Layers are organized according to two different features. One is the visual hierarchy within a scene. So for example, if I selected layer 1, I could move it down to the bottom of my timeline, and when I let go, notice I'm no longer going to see that word. That's because it's underneath this other layer for my snowboard. So if you want to make adjustments to different layer parameters, you have to open these triangles. So when I open the triangles, notice I have 3 different groups. Every single layer has a transform group, so I'm going to open that. Under Transform, if I wanted to bring the opacity of the layer down, I could just click on the value for opacity and click and drag to the left. Now notice my snowboard word is popping back through visually. So layer hierarchy is one way to control visibility between layers inside your composition panel. Another way is through time. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse layer 3 here and reselect our layer 4. If we move to the right side of the layer panel, you'll see this thing that looks like a guitar pick. This is our current time indicator. If I click and drag on that current time indicator, now I'm actually starting to see the video footage that we're working with. Now let's say I didn't want my text to appear until about 1 second into my project. Well, in the timeline, I can actually click on the left edge of the text and drag it over towards the right. Now, as you're manipulating elements within the interface of After Effects, you want to look into the upper right corner. Notice as I'm dragging the left edge, in the info panel, I can see exactly where I am as I drag. And I know, okay, if I want it to start at 1 second, I'll just go ahead and drag till I get to the 1 second in point. Now when I let go, I know my word snowboard is not going to appear until 1 second. So visually within your comp panel, you can control layers appearance by layer hierarchy vertically, and then in time horizontally. And as you can see, there's a direct relationship between the layers panel and the composition window. Now there are some settings within each individual panel that you should be relatively comfortable with, and this will round out our tour. If we look in the timeline down at the bottom, there's this button that toggles switches and modes. If we click that, we'll get different parts of our layers visible. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, we have access to blend modes. That's under this pull down here. If I click on that, I could blend my video layer over top of my text layer. Now I want to leave my modes set alone. We'll definitely explore those more a little later. If I go back to my switches here, now I have access to change things. For example, my snowboard layer. Let's say I wanted that to exist in 3D space. Well, there's a column here under this box for 3D. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that. Now I can't see this layer, so I'm going to move my current time indicator down in the timeline until my word snowboard exists. So notice now I have these crazy control handles. If I turn my 3D off and on for that layer, notice now I'm getting a different set of controls. So with 3D, I can go ahead and click and control the position of the word in my composition panel by clicking on these control handles. Now, tools have a direct impact as well. I can go ahead and press W to grab my rotation tool. And with my rotation tool selected, if I hover over any of the control handles, let's say my Y control handle, I can click and drag, and now I can spin that word around on the Y axis. Now, as I make these adjustments, I also have access to those adjustments in my timeline. So if we go down here, I can open up my options for layer 4, and we'll look at transform again. And notice now I can click and drag on the Y parameter for the rotation of my word. Now, that's pretty much it for the interface inside of After Effects. I'm going to scroll up and down to control what I'm looking at within my timeline, and I can collapse layer 4. We'll definitely continue going through different aspects of the interface as we move throughout the rest of the course, but I hope you have a good general idea as to how the different panels work together to create an overall experience for the interface of After Effects. Yeah.